Sometimes life's greatest treasures hide in plain sight. In a weathered countryside estate, Michael Thompson works tirelessly as a caretaker, tending to a paralyzed man who hasn't spoken a word in years. Day after day, he reads stories, shares meals, and even brings his young daughter Emma to brighten the quiet halls. What Michael doesn't know is that behind those unresponsive eyes lies one of the world's wealthiest men, a billionaire silently searching for someone worthy of his legacy. But what makes a person truly deserving of such an extraordinary gift? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Michael Thompson stared at the stack of bills on his kitchen table, each envelope marked with an angry red final notice stamp. The dim light of dawn crept through the worn curtains, casting long shadows across the pile of financial obligations that seemed to grow taller with each passing month. His fingers traced the edge of his late wife Sarah's medical bills, still unpaid after 3 years. The quiet of the morning was broken by the soft padding of feet down the hallway. "Daddy!" Emma's sleep-tousled head appeared around the corner, her stuffed giraffe trailing behind her. At 8 years old, she had her mother's eyes, deep brown, and full of quiet wisdom. "Hey, sweetheart." Michael quickly shuffled the bills into a drawer. "You're up early. I heard you moving around." Emma climbed onto his lap, a habit she'd never outgrown. "Are you worried about money again?" Michael's heart clenched. Children shouldn't have to understand such adult concerns, yet Emma had developed an uncanny ability to read his moods. Perhaps it came from being thrust into a world of loss too young, learning to navigate grief alongside her father, just grown up. "Stuff," he assured her, kissing the top of her head. The scent of her strawberry shampoo reminded him of better days, when Sarah would braid Emma's hair before school. "How about some breakfast? We've got..." He opened the refrigerator, surveying its meager contents. "Eggs and toast? Can we have cinnamon toast, like Mom used to make?" "Of course we can." Michael reached for the nearly empty cinnamon shaker. These small requests always hit him hardest, the simple traditions Sarah had created that now fell to him to maintain. As Emma ate her breakfast, Michael unfolded the local newspaper, scanning the job listings for the 3rd time that week. His current position at the hardware store barely covered their basic needs, and the weekend maintenance work at the local church wasn't enough to bridge the gap. Emma's school supplies list for the upcoming year sat on the counter, a reminder of yet another expense he couldn't afford to ignore. His eyes caught on a small advertisement in the corner of the page. "Caretaker needed. Live-in position at private estate. Experience with medical care preferred but not required. Generous compensation. Immediate start possible." The word generous made his heart skip a beat. The possibility of a live-in position would eliminate rent, their biggest expense. But it would mean uprooting Emma, changing her school. "Daddy, I'm going to be late." Emma's voice snapped him from his thoughts. She was right. They had 10 minutes before her school bus arrived. As he helped Emma pack her backpack, making sure her homework was safely tucked inside, Michael couldn't shake the advertisement from his mind. That evening, after Emma was asleep, he called the number listed. The stern voice that answered scheduled an interview for the following morning, providing directions to an estate he'd driven past countless times but never really noticed. That night, as Michael sat on the edge of Emma's bed watching her sleep, he made a silent promise, the same one he'd made every night since Sarah's passing. Somehow, some way, he would give their daughter the life she deserved, even if it meant taking a chance on something completely unknown. The gravel crunched under Michael's tires as he drove through the rusted iron gates of Sterling Estate. Early morning mist clung to the unkempt grounds, shrouding the mansion in an almost ethereal haze. The building itself seemed to emerge from another era, its Victorian architecture proud but weathered, like an elderly aristocrat fallen on hard times. Mrs. Harrison awaited him on the front steps, her grey hair pulled into a severe bun, clipboard clutched to her chest. Her appearance matched her voice from the phone call. "All business, no nonsense. Mr. Thompson," she said, extending a thin hand. "Punctuality is essential in this position. You're 3 minutes early. That's acceptable." The faintest hint of approval crossed her features before vanishing. Inside, the mansion told two stories at once. Beneath the dust and neglect lay glimpses of former grandeur, intricate woodwork, crystal chandeliers, and oil paintings in heavy gilt frames. Michael followed Mrs. Harrison through a maze of corridors, their footsteps echoing on marble floors. "The position requires complete dedication," she explained, her heels clicking against the stone. "You would live on site in the caretaker's cottage adjacent to the main house. Your primary responsibility would be attending to Mr. Sterling's daily needs. And my daughter," Michael ventured carefully. "The advertisement mentioned this was a live-in position." Mrs. Harrison paused, turning to face him. "Mr. Sterling has no objection to children, provided they're well-behaved. The cottage has 2 bedrooms. Your daughter's schooling could be arranged locally." They stopped before a heavy oak door. Mrs. Harrison's voice lowered. "Mr. Sterling has been unresponsive for the past 5 years. He requires assistance with all daily activities, feeding, bathing, medication. We've had 7 caretakers in the past 3 years. None lasted more than 6 months. May I ask why?" "The isolation, the responsibility, the silence." She gestured to the door. "See for yourself." The room beyond was spacious but sparsely furnished. Sunlight filtered through partially drawn curtains, illuminating a hospital-style bed where a man lay motionless. William Sterling appeared to be in his 60s, his silver hair neatly combed, his face clean-shaven, presumably by the previous caretaker. His eyes were open but vacant, staring at nothing. "Good morning, Mr. Sterling," Mrs. Harrison said crisply. "This is Michael Thompson, interviewing for the caretaker position." No response, not even a flicker of acknowledgement. Michael approached the bed slowly. Something about the stillness of the man struck him, not the vacancy of someone absent, but the quietness of someone listening. "Hello, Mr. Sterling," Michael said softly. "It's nice to meet you." For a moment, so brief Michael nearly missed it, something shifted in those distant eyes. Then it was gone. Mrs. Harrison reviewed the duties, medication schedules, feeding, times, physical therapy exercises, daily reports. The salary she mentioned made Michael's breath catch, more than triple his current income. When she presented the contract, her pen poised expectantly, Michael thought of Emma, of bills paid on time, of not having to choose between new shoes and school supplies. "There's one more thing," Michael said, studying Mr. Sterling's face. "Would it be all right if sometimes my daughter visited? She's 8, very quiet. She loves to read. Maybe she could read to Mr. Sterling sometimes?" This time, the change in Sterling's expression was unmistakable, the slightest softening around the eyes. Mrs. Harrison noticed it too. Her clipboard lowered slightly. "I suppose that could be arranged." She sounded uncertain for the first time. "Though I should warn you, Mr. Thompson, this position, it's not just about physical care. Some days the silence, it becomes almost tangible." Michael looked at the man in the bed, remembering countless silent nights after Sarah's passing, when words seemed inadequate against the weight of loss. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "silence can say more than words." He signed the contract. Mrs. Harrison nodded briskly, reverting to her efficient manner. "You can move in this weekend. I'll have the cottage prepared." She paused at the door. "Mr. Thompson, do remember, appearances here can be deceiving. Even the silence has purpose." With that cryptic warning, she left Michael alone with his new charge, the contract's pages still warm from his signature. In the bed, Mr. Sterling continued his unblinking vigil. But something had changed in the quality of his silence. It felt, somehow, expectant. The caretaker's cottage exceeded Michael's expectations. Though small, it had been thoroughly cleaned and furnished, with fresh linens on the beds and even a vase of flowers on the kitchen table. Emma's room overlooked a neglected garden that, despite its overgrown state buzzed with butterflies and honeybees. "It's like a fairy tale house, Daddy." Emma spun in circles, her boxes of belongings forgotten by the door. "Can I plant flowers in the garden?" "We'll see, sweetheart." Michael consulted the patient care log Mrs. Harrison had given him. His first official duty would begin in 20 minutes, helping Mr. Sterling with breakfast. The morning routine proved more challenging than expected. Sterling's unresponsiveness meant every movement required careful manipulation, lifting him to a sitting position, supporting his head, ensuring each spoonful of pureed food reached its destination. Yet Michael noticed small things: how Sterling's breathing would change slightly when approached, the way his eyes would track movement even when his face remained impassive. In his log entry that evening, Michael wrote, "Patient shows subtle signs of awareness, responds to voice and touch through minor physiological changes. Will continue to monitor." Days fell into a rhythm. Wake at 6. Help Sterling with morning hygiene and breakfast. Physical therapy exercises, gentle stretches and joint rotations to prevent muscle atrophy. Lunch at noon, afternoon care, evening routine. Each task meticulously recorded in the log. Emma adapted to her new school with surprising ease, coming home with stories about her classmates and teachers. She took to visiting Sterling's room after finishing her homework, perching in the oversized armchair by his bed. "Can I read to him, Daddy? Like you read to me when I'm sick?" Michael glanced at Sterling, noting the barely perceptible shift in his expression. "I think he'd like that." Emma's clear voice filled the usually quiet room with tales of magical wardrobes and talking animals. Michael, changing Sterling's IV bag, could have sworn he saw the man's finger twitch during a particularly exciting passage. The other staff kept their distance. The cook, Mrs. Chen, left meals in the kitchen without a word. The groundskeeper, old Mr. Peters, tipped his hat when they passed but never spoke. Only Mrs. Harrison maintained regular contact, appearing each evening to review Michael's logs with sharp-eyed scrutiny. One evening, as Michael was finishing Sterling's dinner routine, Emma burst into the room, clutching a paper in her hand. "Daddy, look, I got an A on my math test." "That's wonderful, honey, but remember to knock first." "Sorry, Mr. Sterling," Emma said, approaching the bed. "Would you like to see my test? I worked really hard on it." Michael started to redirect her, but stopped. Sterling's eyes had moved, focusing directly on the paper Emma held up. For several seconds, his gaze remained fixed on the red letter A. "Patient showed marked interest in child's academic achievement," Michael wrote later. "Sustained focus on presented object for 7 to 8 seconds. That night, after Emma was asleep, Michael sat at their small kitchen table, reviewing his notes from the past 2 weeks. Something wasn't adding up. The previous caretaker's logs described Sterling as completely non-reactive and vegetative. Yet Michael had documented dozens of small responses, subtle but undeniable. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Mrs. Harrison stood at the cottage door, her usual clipboard absent. "Mr. Thompson, might I have a word?" She settled stiffly into a kitchen chair, declining his offer of tea. "Your logs are interesting. You're noting behaviors that others missed. Or perhaps—" She paused, studying him intently. "Perhaps you're seeing things they weren't meant to see." "I don't understand." "No, you don't." She stood abruptly. "Continue as you are, Mr. Thompson. And remember, in this house, everything is a test, even this conversation." She left before he could respond, her words hanging in the quiet kitchen. Michael returned to Sterling's room for one final check before bed. In the dimness, he could have sworn those supposedly vacant eyes followed his movement. "Good night, Mr. Sterling," he said softly. "Emma wants to finish her story tomorrow, if that's all right with you." The silence that answered felt different now, less empty, more expectant, like someone waiting in the wings of a theater, watching the play unfold. The leather-bound copy of The Little Prince had appeared mysteriously on Emma's chair one morning, its gold-leafed pages suggesting a history of careful handling. Mrs. Harrison, when questioned, merely raised an eyebrow. It was Mr. Sterling's favorite. Perhaps he'd like to hear it again. Emma treated the book like a sacred artifact, carefully turning each page as she read aloud. Once, when I was 6 years old, I saw a magnificent picture in a book. Her voice carried through the autumn afternoon, while outside, leaves danced past the window in shades of amber and gold. Michael, organizing Sterling's medications, noticed how his patient's breathing changed during the reading, becoming deeper, more regular, almost peaceful. He'd begun documenting these subtle shifts in a personal notebook, separate from the official log. Small things, a finger twitch during emotional passages, eyes tracking Emma's movements, slight changes in muscle tension when certain topics arose. "What do you think, Mr. Sterling?" Emma would ask after each chapter, as naturally as if she expected an answer. The Prince's Rose was pretty silly, wasn't she? But he loved her anyway. One particularly cold morning, as Michael adjusted Sterling's blankets, he found himself talking about Sarah. "Emma has her smile," he said quietly, not entirely sure why he was sharing this. That kind of smile that makes you feel like everything's going to be okay even when it isn't. Sterling's eyes, usually focused on some distant point, shifted to meet his. The contact lasted only seconds, but Michael felt seen in a way that made his hands tremble slightly as he finished his task. These moments accumulated like snowflakes, each one small but building towards something substantial. Emma began doing her homework in Sterling's room, chattering about her day between math problems. "Jenny said my dress was weird today, but I told her it was Mom's favorite, so I don't care what she thinks." "Do you think that was right, Mr. Sterling?" Michael watched as Sterling's expression softened almost imperceptibly. These micro-reactions were becoming more frequent, more noticeable to those who knew to look for them. Mrs. Harrison's evening visits took on a different tone. She still reviewed the logs with careful attention, but her questions became more pointed. "You've noticed the changes in his responsiveness?" "Yes," Michael answered carefully, though the official logs from before suggested the official logs show what previous caretakers were capable of seeing, she interrupted. "Or perhaps what they were willing to see. Tell me, Mr. Thompson, why do you think Emma reads to him every day?" "Because she wants to. Because she thinks he's listening." "And is he?" Michael thought about the subtle changes he'd witnessed. "Yes. He's always listening." Mrs. Harrison nodded slowly. "Interesting that a child could see what trained professionals could not. Or perhaps—" She tapped her pen against her clipboard. "Perhaps it's not what she sees, but how she sees it." That evening, Emma had a question while reading. "Daddy, why does the prince keep asking questions about everything?" Before Michael could answer, he noticed Sterling's hand, the slightest movement of his index finger, like someone trying to point. "Sometimes," Michael said, watching Sterling's face, "asking questions is how we learn what's real and what isn't. Like the prince learning about what matters most." Emma considered this, then turned to Sterling. "Is that why you listen so carefully?" "Mr. Sterling, are you trying to learn about us too?" The silence that followed felt heavy with meaning. Michael recorded in his private notebook, "First direct acknowledgement of Sterling's observation. E continues to perceive what others miss." Later that night, after Emma was asleep, Michael returned to Sterling's room with a cup of tea, a habit he'd developed during his evening checks. "She's remarkably perceptive, isn't she?" he said softly. "Sarah was like that too, could always tell what people were really thinking, really feeling behind their words." He sat in the chair beside Sterling's bed, watching the moonlight create patterns on the wall. I think you're teaching us something, aren't you? Through all this silence, through these small moments." He smiled slightly, like the fox teaching the little prince about what's essential, being invisible to the eyes. As he stood to leave, he could have sworn he saw the ghost of a smile touch Sterling's lips. In his notebook that night he wrote, "The silence speaks volumes. We just have to learn its language." The old newspaper clipping fell from between the pages of a medical reference book Michael was consulting. Yellowed with age, its headline caught his eye. Sterling Industries CEO withdraws from public life. The accompanying photo showed a younger William Sterling at a charity gala, distinguished in a tuxedo, his eyes sharp with intelligence and purpose. Michael's hands trembled as he read, following the tragic death of his wife and daughter in a boating accident, business titan William Sterling has announced an indefinite leave of absence. The date was exactly 5 years ago. A soft knock interrupted his discovery. Michael hastily tucked the clipping into his pocket as Mrs. Harrison entered with 2 serious-looking men in expensive suits. "Mr. Thompson, these gentlemen are Mr. Sterling's attorneys. They need to review some paperwork. If you could give us the room?" Michael nodded, but lingered by the door after leaving, their muffled voices carrying through the heavy oak. "His responses are increasing," one man said. "Harrison reports multiple instances of deliberate interaction, and the caretaker, his daughter, unaware, though the child seems to have an unusual effect on him. The board is getting anxious. 5 years of silence, and now—" Mrs. Harrison's sharp tone cut through. "Mr. Sterling's instructions were explicit. We wait until he's ready." Later that afternoon, Emma sat in her usual spot, homework spread across her lap. "Mr. Sterling, did you know there was a big company named after you? We learned about important businesses in social studies today, and Sterling Industries was on the list." Michael, changing Sterling's IV, watched carefully. The man's finger twitched against the blanket, a movement becoming more frequent lately. "They make all sorts of things," Emma continued, oblivious to the weight of her words. "Jenny's dad works at one of their factories. She said they're the biggest employer in 3 states. That evening, after Emma was asleep, Michael did something he'd never done before. He opened his laptop and searched for William Sterling. The results were overwhelming. Sterling Industries, a global corporation worth billions. Technological innovations, medical breakthroughs, charitable foundations. And at the center of it all, the man now lying silently in the mansion's master bedroom. The articles painted a picture of a brilliant but private man. No scandals, no controversies, just steady success and quiet philanthropy. Until the accident. Until the silence. A soft sound from Sterling's room drew Michael's attention. He found his patient awake, eyes fixed on the window where moonlight streamed in. "I found the article," Michael said quietly, pulling the yellowed clipping from his pocket. "About your family, I'm so sorry." He paused, watching Sterling's face. "Emma, she reminds you of her, doesn't she? Your daughter?" The change in Sterling's expression was subtle but unmistakable. A deepening around the eyes, a tension in the jaw. "That's why Mrs. Harrison let us stay. Why you respond to her." Michael sat in the bedside chair. "But there's more to it, isn't there? This silence, it's not just grief. You're watching, observing, testing something or someone." Down the hall, a floorboard creaked. Michael turned to find Mrs. Harrison in the doorway, her face unreadable. "Quite the detective, aren't you, Mr. Thompson?" Her voice held an odd note. Not anger, but something like approval. "Though you're only seeing the surface of a very deep pond, the attorneys today. They're not just checking on his health, are they? Everything in this house has purpose, Mr. Thompson, even questions left unanswered." She glanced at Sterling. "Especially those." That night, Michael updated his private notebook. Patient's condition appears voluntary, at least partially. Connection to Emma suggests emotional rather than physical catalyst. Growing evidence of conscious observation and evaluation, but of what and why? As he wrote, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was part of something larger, a carefully orchestrated performance where he couldn't quite see the whole stage. In his pocket, the newspaper clipping felt heavy with unspoken possibilities. Outside his window, the estate grounds stretched into darkness, its overgrown gardens and weathered facade a stark contrast to the corporate empire its owner had built. Somewhere in that contrast, Michael sensed, lay the truth he was only beginning to understand. The crisis came without warning on a quiet Sunday afternoon. Emma had been reading from The Little Prince when Sterling's breathing suddenly changed, becoming shallow, labored. Michael noticed immediately, his years of caring for Sarah having trained him to recognize the subtle signs of distress. "Emma, go get Mrs. Harrison. Quick now." The next few minutes passed in a blur of focused intensity. Sterling's lips had taken on a bluish tinge, his oxygen levels dropping rapidly according to the bedside monitor. Michael's hands moved with practiced efficiency, checking airways, adjusting position, reaching for the emergency oxygen supply he'd familiarized himself with but never needed to use. "Come on, Mr. Sterling," he murmured, fitting the oxygen mask. "Stay with us." Mrs. Harrison burst in with Emma close behind. "The ambulance is 8 minutes out." He might not have 8 minutes. Michael's voice remained steady, though his heart raced. "Emma, sweetheart, I need you to hold Mr. Sterling's hand. Talk to him like you always do. Mrs. Harrison, help me." With his positioning, as they worked, Emma's small voice rose above the monitor's urgent beeping. "Remember the part we just read, Mr. Sterling, about how the prince had to leave his planet to learn what mattered most? You can't leave yet. We haven't finished the story." Something shifted in Sterling's expression, a flicker of consciousness, a fight. His oxygen levels began to stabilize. "That's it," Michael encouraged, adjusting the mask. "Listen to Emma's voice. Stay with us." By the time the paramedics arrived, the immediate danger had passed. The emergency room doctor would later note in his report, "Patient stabilized prior to emergency transport due to quick intervention by caretaker. Notable improvement in respiratory function attributed to immediate response and appropriate emergency care procedures." That evening in the hospital's private room, Michael sat watching the steady rise and fall of Sterling's chest. Emma had finally fallen asleep in the chair beside him, her hand still clasping Sterling's. She wouldn't leave. Michael explained softly to the silent man. "Said you needed to know someone was here." He paused, studying Sterling's face. "Just like I stayed with Sarah every night in the hospital. Sometimes presence matters more than words." A slight pressure against Emma's hand, so subtle it could have been dismissed as involuntary. But Michael saw Sterling's finger move deliberately, curling around his daughter's small fingers. Mrs. Harrison appeared in the doorway, her usual clipboard replaced by a thick folder. "The medical team is quite impressed with your handling of the crisis, Mr. Thompson, as is Mr. Sterling's board of directors." "His board? Why would they—" "Because," she interrupted, "Mr. Sterling's condition has shown marked improvement since your arrival. Today's incident demonstrated not just your medical competence, but something far more valuable." She glanced at Emma's sleeping. "A form. The ability to see what matters most." The hospital stay lasted 3 days. Michael maintained his care routine, but something had changed. Sterling's responses, though still subtle, became more frequent. His eyes tracked movement with clear purpose now. The doctors noted improved neural activity, though they seemed puzzled by the sudden change. On the final evening before Sterling's discharge, Michael was updating his notes when he noticed writing on the back of the emergency room report. Careful, shaky letters formed with what must have been tremendous effort. "Thank you." Heart pounding, Michael studied Sterling's face. The man's eyes met his directly, filled with an awareness that could no longer be dismissed as coincidental. "You're welcome," Michael said quietly, "though it was really Emma who brought you back." A ghost of a smile touched Sterling's lips, the first real expression Michael had seen since taking the job. That night's entry in Michael's private notebook read, "First confirmed communication. Patient fully conscious and aware. Choosing silence. For reasons still unknown. Emergency served as catalyst for deeper connection. Emma's presence continues to be a crucial factor in his engagement." As he wrote, Michael couldn't shake the feeling that they'd passed some sort of test, one that had nothing to do with medical emergencies and everything to do with the way Emma had refused to leave. the way they'd worked together as a family. Would, without question or hesitation. In the hospital room, Sterling slept peacefully, his hand still loosely holding Emma's, as if anchoring himself to the simple, profound truth of a child's unconditional care. Security cameras had been installed during Sterling's hospital stay, silent sentinels recording every interaction in his room. Michael noticed them immediately upon their return, their small red lights blinking steadily in the corners. Mrs. Harrison offered no explanation beyond a cryptic, "The board requires additional monitoring now," but it was the changes in Sterling himself that commanded Michael's attention. Though still largely non-verbal, his responses had become unmistakable. His hand would move to indicate preferences, left for no, right for yes. His eyes now followed conversations with sharp intelligence, no longer maintaining the vacant stare of before. Emma, with a child's adaptability, took these changes in stride. "Mr. Sterling wants the curtains open more," she announced one morning, interpreting his subtle gestures. "He likes watching the birds in the garden." The garden itself had become another symbol of transformation. The ground staff, previously invisible, now worked diligently to restore the neglected flower beds. Michael caught Mrs. Harrison watching Emma plant daffodil bulbs beneath Sterling's window. "Spring will be lovely," she remarked, her usual severity softened. "If all things bloom as intended," but winter's grip held firm, bringing new challenges. Emma came home from school one day with tears in her eyes, clutching a notice about upcoming class fees and required supplies for the spring semester. Michael's savings, despite the generous salary, had been depleted by unexpected medical bills from Sarah's final treatments. That evening, as Michael helped Sterling with his evening routine, his worry must have shown on his face. Emma's school. "Fees," he explained, noticing Sterling's questioning look. "Just trying to figure things out," he managed a smile. "Nothing we won't handle." The next morning, Mrs. Harrison appeared with an envelope. "A performance bonus," she explained, the amount making Michael's eyes widen. "Mr. Sterling was quite impressed with your handling of the recent situation." Michael looked to Sterling, who met his gaze steadily. A security camera whirred quietly, adjusting its angle. "I can't accept this much." "You can," Mrs. Harrison interrupted, "and you will. Consider it an investment in Emma's education." That afternoon, the security footage would have captured a curious scene. Emma, doing her homework as usual in Sterling's room, looked up suddenly. "Did you have children, Mr. Sterling, before you got sick?" Michael, organizing medications nearby, froze, but Sterling's response was immediate, a single tear tracking down his cheek as his hand moved right. "Yes, I bet you were a good—" "Oh, Dad," Emma said softly, "you listen like my daddy does." The cameras recorded Sterling's hand, reaching slowly toward Emma, his fingers trembling with effort. She took it naturally, as if they'd been holding hands all along. "It's okay to be sad," she told him. "Daddy says it means we loved someone very much." Later that night, reviewing the day's care notes, Michael found a folded paper that hadn't been there before. Inside, in Mrs. Harrison's precise handwriting, "Security footage from today has been archived at Mr. Sterling's request. Some moments deserve to be preserved." The note included a still image from the cameras, Emma holding Sterling's hand, both of their faces reflecting a shared understanding of loss and comfort. Michael carefully tucked it into his private notebook. That evening, during the final check, Sterling's monitor displayed elevated heart rate and blood pressure readings. "Pain?" Michael asked, concerned. "Should I call—" Sterling's hand moved left. No. His eyes conveyed something more complex than physical discomfort. "Memories," Michael guessed softly. "A slight move, right?" "Yes." "The hardest part," Michael said. "Adjusting Sterling's blankets. Isn't the big moments, it's the small ones. Finding her favorite cereal at the store, hearing a song she loved, watching Emma grow up without her mother." He paused. "But sometimes those same small moments help us heal." Sterling's eyes met his, filled with a depth of understanding that needed no words. Above them, the security camera continued its vigilant recording, capturing a moment of connection between two fathers who had learned the same painful lessons about love and loss. In his notebook that night, Michael wrote, "The cameras see everything, but perhaps not what matters most. That lives in the spaces between recordings, in shared silence, in understood grief, in small gestures of comfort freely given and gratefully received." The annual report landed on Michael's desk with deliberate casualness, Mrs. Harrison's way of leaving breadcrumbs without explicit direction. "Sterling Industries marks 5th year of leadership transition," the cover declared, alongside a photo of an empty chair in a sleek boardroom. "The board meeting ran long today," Mrs. Harrison mentioned, lingering by the door. "They're quite interested in Mr. Sterling's progress." Michael leafed through the report, numbers swimming before his eyes. Sterling Industries, 50,000 employees. Worldwide, market capitalization in the billions, breakthrough patents in medical technology, renewable energy, artificial intelligence. And at the center of it all, a man who now communicated through hand twitches and eye movements. Later that afternoon, Emma burst into Sterling's room waving a newspaper. "Look what we learned in current events. They're opening a new Sterling Industries medical center that's going to help kids with cancer for free. Is that your company, Mr. Sterling? Is that why you have their annual report?" The silence in the room grew heavy. Sterling's eyes met Michael's, something like resignation, mixing with determination in his gaze. "Emma, honey," Michael started, but Sterling's hand moved deliberately to the side table, where a silver bell lay unused since Michael's arrival. With visible effort, Sterling's fingers curled around it. The sound that filled the room was clear, purposeful. Once, twice, 3 times, Mrs. Harrison appeared, as if she'd been waiting for this moment. "That's the signal we've been waiting for," she said, her usual efficiency colored by emotion. "Mr. Thompson, I believe it's time you knew everything." What followed was a revelation that, despite Michael's growing suspicions, still left him reeling. William Sterling, the man he'd been caring for, wasn't just namesake of Sterling Industries. He was its genius founder, the architect of its global success, and still its majority shareholder. "The accident changed everything," Mrs. Harrison explained, while Emma listened wide-eyed from her usual spot beside Sterling. Mr. Sterling's wife and daughter, Helen and Grace, they were everything to him. After losing them, he withdrew, not just from the company, but from life itself. Sterling's hand moved to Emma's, squeezing gently. "But the silence," Mrs. Harrison continued, "was never about grief alone. It became a test of character, of genuine care, of—" she glanced at Emma, "of family. The other caretakers," Michael said slowly, "they all knew who he was?" Most figured it out quickly. Their behavior changed immediately, becoming deferential, calculating. Some tried to curry favor. Others sought to exploit. All failed to see the person behind the fortune. Sterling's hand moved again, this time reaching for the tablet Mrs. Harrison produced from her ever-present clipboard. His fingers, trembling with effort, typed slowly, "Until you and Emma." Michael sat heavily in the bedside chair. Memories, realigning with new context, the generous salary, the performance bonus, the careful observation. "All this time you were watching us, testing everyone," Mrs. Harrison corrected. "The board, the staff, potential caretakers. Mr. Sterling needed to know who could be trusted with not just his care, but his legacy." Emma, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke up. "Is that why you like our stories so much, Mr. Sterling? Because you were looking for people who'd tell you true ones?" Sterling's smile transformed his entire face. On the tablet, he laboriously typed, "Wisdom from the mouths of babes. The board is meeting again tomorrow," Mrs. Harrison said. "They'll want to know about this development, about you both." She paused. "Things will change now." Michael looked at Sterling, remembering all the quiet moments, the shared understanding, the gradual building of trust. "Some things won't change," he said firmly. "We'll still be here, still caring, still family." Sterling's eyes glistened as he typed, "That's exactly why I chose you." That night, after Emma was asleep, Michael sat in Sterling's room, their usual comfortable silence now heavy with revelation. "You could have told us sooner," he said finally. Sterling's fingers moved across the tablet. "Had to be sure. Real care can't be bought." Michael thought of Sarah, of all she'd taught him about love being shown through actions rather than words. "No," he agreed softly, "it can't." In his notebook that night, Michael wrote, "Truth revealed, but biggest. Revelation isn't about wealth or power. It's about how genuine care creates its own kind of richness. Emma saw it first, as children often do. Sometimes the most valuable things are those freely given, without expectation of return." The morning after the revelation dawned with a different quality of silence. Michael went about his usual routine: medications, morning care, breakfast preparation, while Sterling watched with eyes that no longer needed to hide their intelligence. Emma had just settled into her usual chair with The Little Prince when Sterling's hand trembled, reaching for his throat. Michael moved instantly, medical training kicking in, but Sterling's expression stopped him. The voice was raspy, unused, but determined. "It's time." Emma dropped the book. "Mr. Sterling, you can talk." "Yes," he managed, each word carefully formed. "Thanks to both of you." Michael helped him sip water, mind racing. "How long have you been able to—" Speech returned, gradually. Waited. Had to be certain. Sterling's voice grew stronger with each word, like an old engine warming. "Up. Sit, please, both of you." From beneath his pillow, Sterling withdrew a leather-bound journal. His observations over the past months, Michael realized. 5 years. Sterling began, his voice finding its rhythm. 5 years of watching people reveal their true nature when they thought I couldn't respond, when they thought I couldn't understand. He turned to Emma. "You reminded me so much of Grace, my daughter. Not just your age, but your heart. The way you saw me as a person, not a condition." Emma took his hand naturally, as she'd done countless times before. "Because you are a person, the best kind. The listening kind." Sterling's laugh was rough but genuine, out of the mouths of babes indeed. He looked at Michael. "And you, a father doing everything possible for his child, just as I once did. But you showed me something I'd forgotten." "What was that?" Michael asked softly. "That wealth isn't just about money. It's about richness of spirit." Sterling's fingers traced the journal's cover. "After I lost Helen and Grace, I lost myself. The company, the fortune, it all seemed meaningless. Then the vultures came circling. Family I hadn't heard from in years, board members with their own agendas, everyone wanting a piece of the empire." He paused, taking another sip of water. "So I retreated, made my silence a test, watched as caretaker after caretaker revealed their true motivations. Some tried to curry favor, others grew neglectful when they thought I couldn't complain. A few even tried to manipulate my condition for their gain. But why maintain it for so long?" Michael asked. "Because I needed to find someone worthy of not just managing my care, but managing my legacy. Someone who understood that true value isn't measured in dollar signs." Sterling's eyes grew distant. "Helen always said our greatest responsibility was using our resources to help others. Grace had such plans for the Foundation's future." Emma spoke up. "Is that why you're building the hospital for sick kids?" "Yes," Sterling smiled. "That was Grace's dream. She wanted to help children whose families couldn't afford treatment. Like your father helped your mother, Emma, even when the bills became overwhelming." Michael started. "How did you—" "Mrs. Harrison is very thorough in her background checks." Sterling's expression softened. "Your dedication to Sarah's care, even knowing it would leave you in debt, that's when I began to hope we'd found the right person." He shifted, sitting up straighter. "The board meets tomorrow. They'll expect me to name a successor, someone to help guide the company's humanitarian initiatives to ensure the fortune does more than just grow larger. His eyes met Michael's. Someone who understands that wealth without compassion is poverty of the worst kind. Michael felt the weight of Sterling's words. I don't know anything about running a global corporation, but you know everything about what matters most. The rest can be learned. Sterling squeezed Emma's hand. Besides, I'm not going anywhere. Think of it as a partnership, a family partnership. That evening, after Emma had gone to bed, Michael found Sterling writing in his journal. May I? Michael asked, gesturing to the chair. Sterling nodded, continuing to write. Finally, he spoke. Tomorrow will change everything. The board, the press, the world watching, but I want you to know something. He met Michael's eyes. No matter what happens with the company, what you and Emma gave me, genuine care, a reason to rejoin the world, a second chance at family, that's worth more than everything else combined. Michael thought of all the quiet moments, the shared understanding, the gradual building of trust. We didn't do it for any reason, except that it was right. Exactly. Sterling closed his journal. That's exactly why it matters so much. The threat letter arrived by private courier the morning after Sterling's first words. Michael found it slipped under the cottage door, expensive cream-colored stationery bearing a familiar corporate logo. Mrs. Harrison's face tightened when he handed it to her. Victor Sterling, she said grimly, William's nephew. He's been interim CEO since the withdrawal. She passed the letter to Sterling, who read it with narrowing eyes. Blood runs thicker than water, Sterling quoted with bitter amusement. The board won't stand for an outsider taking control of a family legacy. He always did have a flair for dramatic statements. Michael felt a chill despite the morning sun. Should we be concerned? Victor has been positioning himself as my natural successor for years, Sterling explained, his voice stronger now with each passing hour. He's turned the board into his personal chess set, but he's forgotten one crucial detail. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I own controlling interest, and I'm no longer silent. Emma's school called just before lunch. She had fallen during recess, they said. Nothing serious, but could someone pick her up? Michael found her in the nurse's office, knee-scraped, but more shaken than hurt. The new girl pushed me, Emma said quietly on the drive home. She said her uncle told her I shouldn't get too comfortable at my new school. Sterling's face darkened when they related the incident. Victor works quickly, he said, reaching for the phone. Mrs. Harrison, implement security protocol 4. Yes, immediately. Within hours, discreet security personnel appeared on the grounds. A private car was arranged for Emma's school transport. Camera systems were upgraded, and Mrs. Harrison presented Michael with a new phone. Secure lines only, she explained. That evening, while Emma did her homework in Sterling's room under the watchful eye of a security guard, Michael found himself poring over documents Mrs. Harrison had provided. Company histories, board member profiles, financial reports. It's overwhelming, isn't it? Sterling asked, watching him struggle with the corporate jargon. I'm a caretaker, Michael said quietly, a former hardware store clerk. I don't know anything about running a multinational corporation. No, Sterling agreed, but you know about care, integrity, and putting others first. The rest is just details. He paused, considering. When I built this company, I was just the engineer with an idea and a dream of helping people. The business part came later. A soft knock interrupted them. Mrs. Harrison entered with a tablet displaying news headlines. Sterling Industries, stock, tumbles amid succession rumors, and inside sources question Sterling's competency. Victor's allies on the board are moving. Faster than anticipated, she reported. They're calling for an emergency session tomorrow. They'll want to see you in person. Good, Sterling said firmly. It's time they remembered who built this company. He turned to Michael. But first, we need to discuss something important. Emma. Michael's protective instincts flared. If this is too dangerous, that's not it. Sterling's expression softened. When I lost Grace, I lost my purpose. Everything I'd built seemed meaningless without her to share it with, to pass it on to. But Emma, she reminds me so much of Grace, not just her age or circumstances, but her heart. What are you saying? I'm saying that when I name you as my successor, I want to do more than just give you a position. I want to make you and Emma legally part of my family. Full adoption. She would be my granddaughter in name and law, with all the protection and opportunities that brings. Michael sat heavily in the bedside chair. That's too much. We can't possibly what? Accept a grandfather's love. A chance to honor my daughter's memory by helping a child who shares her spirit. Sterling's voice grew. Urgent. Victor thinks he can threaten us because you're outsiders. I want to remove that weapon from his arsenal. By making us family. By recognizing the family we've already become. Later that night, after Emma was asleep, Michael stood at her doorway, watching her peaceful face. On her bedside table, the little prince lay open to the page about what was essential being invisible to the eyes. His phone buzzed with a message from Mrs. Harrison. Board meeting tomorrow, 9 a.m., decision time. Michael thought of Sarah, of her final words about making sure Emma had every chance in life. He thought of Sterling, who had found in them something worth breaking his silence for. He thought of Victor Sterling, who saw only power and possession, where others saw possibility and love. In his notebook that night he wrote, "Sometimes the biggest choices aren't about what we gain, but about who we choose to be. Sometimes family isn't about blood, but about what we're willing to sacrifice for each other." The leather-bound business manual Mrs. Harrison provided was thicker than any book Michael had ever seen. "Your crash course in corporate leadership," she explained, placing it alongside breakfast. "Mr. Sterling's personal notes and strategies from 30 years of building the company." The day began before dawn, Sterling already awake and alert when Michael arrived. "We have 6 hours before the board meeting," he said, his voice stronger each time he spoke. "Time for your first lesson. In what really matters in business, the profit margins, market strategies?" Michael asked, thumbing through the manual's dense pages. Sterling smiled. "No, people." He pressed a button, and the room's television screen flickered to life, showing the face of a middle-aged woman. "Meet Maria Gonzalez, head of our maintenance staff in our Texas facility. 3 children, youngest has cerebral palsy. When Victor tried to cut the company healthcare plan, she organized the workers to fight back." More faces appeared. Workers, researchers, middle managers. Sterling knew their names, their families, their struggles and triumphs. "A company isn't spreadsheets and stock prices," he explained. "It's people, all working together towards something larger than themselves." Emma burst in, ready for school in her new security-mandated routine. "Mr. Sterling, I learned about your company's solar energy project in science class today. Is it true you're giving free electricity to poor neighborhoods?" "Grace's initiative," Sterling said softly. "She believed clean energy shouldn't be a luxury." He turned to Michael. "That's lesson 2. Profit without purpose is meaningless." The morning became a whirlwind of information. Mrs. Harrison brought executives to Sterling's room for introductions, some warm, others barely concealing their skepticism of Michael. Through it all, Sterling guided him, explaining the undercurrents of corporate politics. "Watch Janet from legal," he advised after one particularly tense meeting. "She's supported Victor because she thought she had to, but her heart's with the humanitarian projects. Show her we're expanding those, she'll switch." Sides, Michael's head spun with names, numbers, and strategies. During a brief break, he found Emma's latest drawing on Sterling's bedside table. 3 figures holding hands outside a restored mansion, sun shining above them. "My new family," she'd written in careful letters. "She sees what matters most," Sterling said, following his gaze. "Beyond the corporate empire, beyond the power struggles, family, legacy, purpose." He handed Michael a thick folder. "Speaking of which, the adoption papers. My lawyers drew them up overnight." Michael opened the folder with trembling hands. "Are you sure about this? The board needs to understand that this isn't just about business succession, Sterling interrupted. It's about choosing what kind of future we want to build. Victor sees the company as a tool for power. Grace saw it as a way to help people. Emma, without even knowing it, sees the same thing Grace did. A knock announced Mrs. Harrison with another executive, this one younger, carrying a tablet filled with graphs and projections. As Michael listened to their discussion of market trends and investment strategies, something clicked into place. These solar projects, he interrupted, surprising himself, they're not just about helping poor communities, are they? They're creating future customers, building goodwill, developing new technologies we can scale up. Sterling beamed. Exactly. Profit and purpose aren't enemies, they're partners. Victor never understood that. The morning raced by, each lesson building on the last. Michael learned about sustainable business practices, employee welfare programs, community investment strategies. Sterling's philosophy emerged through it all. Business as a force for positive change, profits as a means rather than an end. Last lesson, Sterling said as the clock approached 9. The most important one. He gestured to the manual, now filled with Michael's notes. All of this, the strategies, the numbers, the corporate politics, it's necessary, but it's not essential. What's essential is remembering why we're doing it. For family, Michael said, thinking of Emma's drawing. For leaving the world better than we found it, just like Grace would have wanted. Sterling nodded. Victor thinks this company is about power. We know it's about responsibility. Mrs. Harrison appeared at the door. The board is assembling. Sterling squeezed Michael's hand. Ready? Michael thought of Sarah, who'd taught him that love means stepping up even when you're scared. He thought of Emma, who saw the best in everyone. He thought of Grace, whose vision they were now entrusted with continuing. Ready. The Sterling Industries boardroom breathed old money and power. All mahogany panels and leather chairs, with a view of the city skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. Victor Sterling stood at the head of the table, his tailored suit and carefully styled grey hair projecting the very image of corporate leadership until the doors opened. William Sterling entered in his wheelchair, Michael pushing him, Mrs. Harrison flanking them with her ever-present clipboard. The board members' reactions ranged from shocked whispers to barely concealed dismay. Victor's smile froze. "Uncle William," he managed, "we didn't expect—" Clearly, Sterling cut him off, voice strong and clear. "Though as CEO of this company, I'm not sure why my presence at a board meeting would be unexpected." Michael positioned Sterling's wheelchair at the table's head, forcing Victor to step aside. The power shift was palpable. "The board has concerns," Victor recovered, producing a document, "about your competency to lead, given your condition." "Condition?" Sterling's eyebrow raised. "You mean my voluntary silence while I evaluated potential successors? That condition?" The boardroom erupted in murmurs. An elderly board member leaned forward. "Voluntary, William?" "Entirely." Sterling's gaze swept the room. "After losing Helen and Grace, I needed to know who could be trusted with their legacy. Who saw this company as more than just a profit machine? And you think this caretaker is that person?" Victor's voice dripped disdain. "A man with no business experience, no education in—" "A man," Sterling interrupted, "who demonstrated exactly the qualities this company was built on. Integrity, compassion, vision." He nodded to Mrs. Harrison, who distributed folders to each board member. "Let's talk about vision." Michael recognized the contents: the solar energy initiative, the children's hospitals, the employee welfare programs, all of Grace's dreams, updated and expanded. "These programs will cut into profits," Victor protested. "The shareholders are looking at projected growth of 20%. Michael spoke up, surprising himself. The morning's lessons clicked into place. Sustainable energy isn't just humanitarian, it's the future of the industry. Community healthcare builds brand loyalty and employee retention. These aren't expenses, they're investments. Janet from legal nodded slowly. the public relations value alone. This isn't about PR, Michael continued, warming to the subject. It's about doing well by doing good. Mr. Sterling built this company to make a difference, not just a profit. Grace understood that. Your shareholders will too. Victor's face reddened. You dare speak her name? You're nothing but an opportunist, using a child to manipulate. That's enough. Sterling's voice cut through the room like steel. You want to talk about manipulation, Victor? Let's discuss your creative accounting in the Asian subsidiaries, or perhaps the pressure you've put on board members' families. The color drained from Victor's face. Mrs. Harrison, Sterling continued, please distribute the second set of documents. The evidence was damning. Years of minor fraud, corporate bullying, and ethical shortcuts. Not enough for criminal charges, but more than enough to end Victor's career. You've been busy during your silence, Uncle, Victor said quietly. I had excellent help. Sterling nodded to Mrs. Harrison. And motivation. Grace would have hated what you were turning her legacy into. An older board member cleared his throat. William, are you formally proposing Mr. Thompson as your successor? More than that. Sterling produced the adoption papers. I'm naming him and his daughter as my legal heirs. The personal fortune, the controlling shares, the foundation, all of it. This is absurd. Victor slammed his hand on the table. You can't give away a family company to strangers. Family. Sterling's voice softened. Michael and Emma showed me more family loyalty in months than you have in years. They reminded me what Grace always knew, that true family is built on love and shared values, not just DNA. The board members exchanged glances. Janet spoke first. I move to approve Mr. Sterling's succession plan, hands raised one by one. Victor watched his support crumble, his carefully built alliances dissolving in the face of Sterling's return and Michael's obvious sincerity. Welcome to the family, Mr. Thompson, the elderly board member said, extending his hand. Though I suspect you've been part of it longer than we realized. Later, reviewing the meeting minutes, Michael would find a note in Sterling's handwriting. Today, we didn't just change company leadership. We proved that Grace's way, leading with heart, as well as head, was right all along. The legal documents arrived in waves, each manila envelope thicker than the last. Challenges to Sterling's competency, objections to the adoption, allegations of undue influence. Victor's lawyers had been busy, their attacks growing more personal. With each filing, they're investigating Sarah's medical records, Mrs. Harrison reported one morning, her usual composure cracking slightly, trying to paint Michael as a fortune hunter who let his wife die to save money. The accusation hit Michael like a physical blow. Sterling, watching him closely, spoke into his phone. Get me Judge Anderson. Yes, I know what time it is in London. This can't wait. Emma sensed the tension, though they tried to shield her from it. She became quieter, jumping at unexpected sounds. The security team reported a car following her school bus. Victor's people, presumably gathering information. Maybe we should withdraw, Michael said one evening, watching Emma sleep fitfully. The company's not worth. It's not about the company anymore, Sterling interrupted, his voice rough with emotion. Victor's not just threatening our business plans. He's threatening our family. He pulled out his tablet, showing Michael a video clip. It was Grace, perhaps 12 years old, presenting a school project. When I grow up, she declared, I'm going to help run Daddy's company, but not just to make money, to make things better. She would have been Emma's age now, Sterling said softly. Victor wants to erase her vision, turn everything she dreamed of into nothing but profit margins. A knock interrupted them. Janet from legal entered, looking grave. They've filed for an emergency injunction. They're claiming the adoption is a scheme to avoid corporate succession laws. Sterling's health chose that moment to remind them of its fragility. A coughing fit seized him, his face going pale. Michael moved instantly to adjust his oxygen, check his vitals. Get Judge Anderson, Sterling managed between coughs. Already done. a familiar voice said from the doorway. The judge, a distinguished woman in her 60s, looked like she'd stepped off a transatlantic flight, which, Michael realized, she had. I've known William for 30 years. When he calls at 3 a.m., I listen. What followed was a masterclass in legal strategy. Judge Anderson reviewed the documents, made calls, pulled strings. The adoption papers are solid, she declared. Victor's challenges are theatrical but legally thin. But the publicity, Janet worried. The media's already running with the gold digger angle. Then we change the narrative, Sterling said, recovering his strength. Michael, remember what we discussed about transparency and trust? Michael nodded slowly. You want to go public? Tell the whole story? Every detail. My silence, the testing, finding you and Emma. Show the world what real family looks like. Sterling turned to Judge Anderson. Can you fast-track the adoption? Give me 48 hours. That night, as Michael made his final rounds, he found Emma in Sterling's room, curled up in her usual chair. Is it my fault? She asked quietly. All the fighting? Sterling reached for her hand. No, sweetheart. It's about grown-ups forgetting what matters most. Like in your book, remember what the fox says about seeing with the heart? Emma nodded. That what's essential is invisible to the eyes. Exactly. Victor sees money and power. We see family and purpose. Sterling's voice grew fierce with protection. And no one is going to take that from us. Later, reviewing the latest legal filings, Michael found a note slipped between pages. A photo of Grace at a company picnic, beaming as she served food at a homeless shelter. On the back, in Sterling's handwriting, she knew that wealth without compassion is poverty of the worst kind. Emma has her heart. Mrs. Harrison appeared with fresh documents requiring signatures. The press conference is set for tomorrow. Victor's people will be there. Good, Sterling said. Let them see what they're really fighting against. Not just a business decision, but a family defending itself. Michael looked at Emma, finally sleeping peacefully in her chair, then at Sterling, whose eyes held both determination and vulnerability. In his own notebook he wrote, Some battles aren't chosen, they choose us. But maybe those are the ones most worth fighting, not for what we might gain, but for what we refuse to lose. The family photograph was taken the morning of the press conference. Michael and Emma on either side of Sterling's wheelchair, the restored garden beginning to bloom behind them. Mrs. Harrison insisted on it, saying, Some moments need to be preserved. This is one of them. The previous night had marked a turning point. Sterling's coughing fits had grown worse, the stress clearly taking its toll. Michael found him reviewing old videos of Grace, his hands trembling slightly. I can't let Victor destroy her legacy, Sterling whispered. But I don't know if I have the strength left to. Then let me, Michael said quietly. You trusted me with your care. Trust me with this. Sterling studied him for a long moment. You know what you're taking on? I'm taking on what we've already built. Michael sat beside him. When Sarah was sick, she made me promise to give Emma every chance at a good life. Not just money or education, but purpose, meaning. He smiled slightly. Sound familiar? Sterling's eyes glistened. Grace used to say the same thing. That morning, Michael took charge. He gathered the PR team, legal advisors, and key board members in Sterling's room. Emma sat in her usual chair, homework open but forgotten as she watched the adults plan. We're not just defending ourselves, Michael declared. We're showing what this company really stands for. Victor wants to make this about money and power. Let's make it about family and purpose instead. Janet from legal nodded approvingly. The adoption papers are ready. Judge Anderson expedited everything. Good. Michael turned to the PR team. I want Grace's charitable projects highlighted. Show how they've grown since I came on board. Show how Emma's influence inspired new youth education initiatives. Sterling watched with pride as Michael commanded the room. Even Mrs. Harrison allowed herself a small smile. What about Victor's allegations? Someone asked. We addressed them head on. Michael pulled out his own files, Sarah's medical records, their financial history. I want everything transparent. Show how we exhausted our savings caring for Sarah. Show the kind of father I've been to Emma." His voice softened. "Show how Sterling Industries' medical research might have saved Sarah. If it had been developed sooner." Emma spoke up suddenly. "Can I tell them about reading to Mr. Sterling, about how he listened even when he couldn't talk?" The room fell silent. Sterling reached for her hand. "Yes, sweetheart. That's exactly what they need to hear." The morning raced by. Michael approved press statements, reviewed legal documents, and coordinated security measures. He found himself drawing on everything Sterling had taught him, but adding his own perspective, a caretaker's attention to detail, a father's protective instincts, a widower's understanding of legacy. Just before noon, Mrs. Harrison entered with, "Breaking news. Victor's giving his own press conference. He's claiming the whole thing is a publicity stunt." "Perfect," Michael said, surprising everyone, "because we have something he doesn't." "What's that?" Sterling asked. "The truth." Michael nodded to Emma, who was helping straighten Sterling's tie. "And living proof of what family really means." The photographer arrived, capturing the moment that would soon be seen worldwide. As the camera flashed, Michael remembered something Sarah used to say, "Family isn't about who you're born to. It's about who you die for." Sterling must have read his thoughts. "She'd be proud of you," he said softly. "Both of them would." Emma looked up from adjusting Sterling's collar. "Are you scared, Daddy?" Michael thought about everything at stake, not just the company and its resources, but the chance to continue Grace's vision, to give Emma the purpose Sarah had dreamed of for her, to show the world that true wealth isn't measured in dollars. "No, sweetheart," he answered honestly. "Not anymore." Mrs. Harrison appeared at the door. "It's time." As they prepared to face the media, Sterling pressed something into Michael's hand, Grace's old company ID badge. "She would have wanted you to have this," he said. "You're carrying her dream forward now." Michael clipped it beside his own ID, feeling its weight like a promise. In his notebook later, he would write, "Today we stop reacting and start leading. Not just a company, but a vision of what family can be, what business should be, what legacy truly means." The adoption papers sat on the podium like a promise made tangible, their fresh signatures still drying beneath the bright lights of the press conference. Michael stood at Sterling's right hand, Emma between them, as cameras flashed and reporters leaned forward in anticipation. Sterling spoke first, his voice carrying the weight of 5 years' silence. "Many of you have speculated about my withdrawal from public life. Today, you'll learn the truth, not just about my silence, but about what it means to build a legacy worthy of those we've lost." The story unfolded like chapters in their shared journey. Sterling spoke of Helen and Grace, of grief that threatened to swallow him whole, of watching his company's values erode under those who saw only profit margins. "So I chose silence," he explained, "not from weakness, but to observe, to test, to find someone who understood that true wealth isn't measured in quarterly reports." Michael stepped forward then, telling their story, Sarah's illness, the struggles as a single father, the chance encounter with a job posting that changed everything. His voice caught when he spoke of Emma's first meeting with Sterling. "She saw him," Michael said simply. "Not the businessman, not the fortune, not even the patient. She saw the person beneath it all, just as he saw us." Emma, in a dress that Sarah would have loved, spoke next. Her clear voice carried to every corner of the packed room. "Mr. Sterling listened like my daddy listens. Even when he couldn't talk, he heard everything. The important stuff, like in The Little Prince, the stuff you see with your heart." Victor burst in then, flanked by lawyers. "This is a farce, a manufactured story to manipulate." "Actually," Judge Anderson's voice cut through as she stood. "From the audience, every word is documented." She held up a thick folder. "Including your recent attempts at intimidation, Victor. The SEC is particularly interested in those." Victor's face drained of color as federal agents appeared at the doors. Sterling's voice remained steady. "This company was built on innovation and compassion, the two qualities my daughter Grace valued most. Today, we're not just announcing a succession plan, we're announcing a return to those values. Michael unveiled their initiatives, expanded medical research, sustainable energy projects, educational programs. These aren't just charitable efforts, he explained, his recent crash course in business evident in his confident delivery. They're investments in our shared future. Profit with purpose, just as Grace envisioned. Janet from legal stepped forward. With more documents. The board's approval is unanimous, she announced. Mr. Thompson's adoption and succession are legally binding. Additionally, Ms. Emma Thompson is named heir to the Sterling Foundation, continuing Grace Sterling's humanitarian vision. Emma's small hand found Sterling's as photographers captured the moment. "Does this mean you're really my grandpa now?" she whispered. "On paper and in heart," Sterling replied, his eyes bright with unshed tears. Victor's last attempt at resistance crumbled as Mrs. Harrison methodically presented evidence of his misconduct, his carefully cultivated image of corporate leadership dissolved beneath the weight of documented fraud and ethical violations. "You can't just give away a family company," he protested weakly. "We're not giving it away," Sterling corrected. "We're ensuring it stays with family, the kind of family Grace would have been proud of." The press conference ended with an unprecedented moment. Sterling Industries' new leadership team gathered around Sterling's wheelchair, not in a corporate boardroom, but in the restored garden where Emma had planted daffodils months ago. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. New growth, fresh beginnings, legacy renewed. Later that evening, as the media frenzy died down, they gathered in Sterling's room. Emma had fallen asleep in her usual chair, the day's excitement finally catching up with her. Michael found himself holding Grace's old company ID, now officially his. "Having second thoughts?" Sterling asked softly. Michael watched Emma sleep, thinking of Sarah's last wish for their daughter to have every opportunity. He thought of Grace's vision for the company, now entrusted to their care. He thought of the responsibility they'd inherited, not just to run a business, but to prove that success and compassion could coexist. "No," he said finally, just wondering what Sarah would make of all this. Sterling smiled. "I think she and Grace are watching together, proud of what their love set in motion. The adoption papers had been filed, the succession confirmed, the challenges overcome. But as Michael wrote in his notebook that night, the real victory wasn't in the legal documents or corporate transitions. It was in the simple truth Emma had seen from the beginning, that family, like love, grows not from obligation, but from choice, from seeing with the heart. The estate renovation plans spread across Sterling's desk, showing not just structural repairs, but a complete transformation. The old caretaker's cottage would become a guest house, while the mansion's east wing was being converted into comfortable family quarters. But it was the garden that commanded the most attention. Emma's careful drawings of flower beds and butterfly gardens pinned alongside professional landscaping designs. "Grace would have loved this," Sterling said, watching through the window. As Emma directed the gardeners on proper daffodil placement, she always said this place needed more color. 3 months had passed since the press conference. Victor faced federal charges, the company's stock had stabilized, and most importantly, their unusual family had found its rhythm. Michael split his time between the corporate offices and home, refusing to give up his role as Sterling's primary caretaker, despite having a staff at his disposal. "Some responsibilities aren't about obligation," he'd explained to the board. "They're about choice." Sterling's health had improved markedly since the stress of succession had lifted. He'd taken to holding informal board meetings in the garden, where Emma's newly planted flowers added splashes of color to the corporate discussions. "Your quarterly projections are impressive," Mrs. Harrison noted one morning, reviewing reports while Emma tended to her garden nearby. "The new medical research initiative is particularly promising. Sarah would have benefited from these treatments," Michael said quietly. Sterling reached over to squeeze his hand, the gesture natural now between them. The foundation work had taken off as well. Emma's presence at charity events brought an authenticity that no corporate PR could manufacture. She spoke to children, in hospitals, with the simple wisdom that had first won Sterling's heart. "My mom died because the medicine wasn't good enough yet," she told one young patient. "But my grandpa and daddy are working to make it better. Sometimes sad things help us know what needs to be fixed." The media had dubbed them the modern family of American business, but their private moments told the truer story. Evening reading. Sessions in Sterling's study, now restored to its former glory, Sunday picnics in the blooming garden. Emma doing homework between corporate meetings, her presence reminding everyone why their work mattered. "Did you see the new hospital designs?" Emma burst in one afternoon waving blueprints. "They're putting gardens on every floor, just like I suggested," Sterling beamed. "Grace's original plans mentioned healing gardens. She would be proud to see you carrying that forward." The changes weren't just physical. Sterling Industries' corporate culture had shifted, emphasizing both profit and purpose. Employee welfare programs expanded, environmental initiatives accelerated, and the Sterling Foundation's budget doubled. "You've achieved more in 3 months than I managed in 5 years of traditional leadership," Sterling told Michael one evening. They were watching Emma teach Mrs. Harrison the proper way to plant tulip bulbs, the usually stern woman kneeling in the dirt with surprising enthusiasm. "It's not just me," Michael replied. "It's all of us. Family makes everything stronger." That night, as they gathered for dinner in the newly renovated dining room, Michael noticed something profound. The formal portrait of Grace that had hung over the fireplace no longer seemed to carry the weight of grief. Instead, surrounded by fresh flowers from Emma's garden, it felt like she was part of their evening, her smile blessing the family that had grown from her father's loss. Sarah's presence was there too, in the way Michael said grace before meals, in Emma's laugh that echoed her mother's, in the lessons about love and care that had prepared Michael for this unexpected journey. Later, reviewing the renovation plans one last time, Michael added a note: "Memorial garden to include Sarah's favorite roses beside Grace's cherished daffodils." Some legacies bloomed together. Sterling found him there, lost in thought. "Having our annual 'How did we get here' moment?" he asked, with gentle understanding. "Just thinking about how loss led to finding," Michael replied, "how endings became beginnings." Emma's voice called from the garden, where the first stars were becoming visible. "Daddy, Grandpa, come see the evening primrose blooming." They went together, Sterling walking now with just a cane, Michael beside him ready to help if needed. The night-blooming flowers were opening slowly, their delicate petals unfurling like the pages of their continuing story. 1 year later, the garden bench overlooking the restored estate grounds became their favorite spot for evening gatherings. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of amber and rose, while Emma's carefully tended flowers filled the air with gentle fragrance. Here, 3 generations would sit together, sharing stories and simple moments that made their unusual family feel perfectly natural. "Tell me again about Mom and Grace," Emma asked one such evening, her head resting against Sterling's knee while Michael sat nearby. At 9 now, she wore her hair in the same style Sarah had once favored, though her growing interest in business meetings and foundation work reflected Grace's influence. "They would have been great friends," Sterling said, his voice strong and clear now. Both of them saw the world not just as it was, but as it could be. The evening news had just featured their latest initiative, a nationwide network of children's hospitals, each with healing gardens designed using Emma's original concepts. The medical research division had made breakthrough discoveries in the same illness that had taken Sarah, developments that would help countless other families. "Your mother believed in fighting for what matters," Michael added softly, "and Grace believed in using success to help others. Together, they gave us our compass." The estate had bloomed into a place of warmth and purpose, the mansions restored. Grandeur now served as both home and hope, hosting charity events, foundation meetings, and quiet family dinners with equal grace. The caretaker's cottage had become a welcome center for families visiting loved ones in their medical facilities. Sterling Industries had transformed too. Under Michael's leadership, guided by Sterling's experience and Emma's innate sense of compassion, the company had become a model of conscious capitalism. Profits soared even as their humanitarian initiatives expanded, proving that success and service could coexist beautifully. Look, Emma pointed to the garden's newest addition, a butterfly sanctuary she'd designed herself. The monarchs are migrating through just like we planned. Sterling watched the orange-winged visitors dance among the flowers. Nature has a way of knowing where to find welcome, he mused, just as people do when we open our hearts. Michael thought about the journey that had brought them here. A desperate job application, a silent billionaire, a child's wisdom that saw beyond surfaces. The security cameras still monitored the estate, but now they captured moments of joy more often than intrigue. Sometimes, Sterling said, as if reading his thoughts, the greatest wealth comes disguised as loss. He squeezed Emma's hand. Sometimes it takes a child to remind us what matters most. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the garden, where Sarah's roses now grew alongside Grace's daffodils, their different blooms creating a harmony neither could have achieved alone. Just like their family, born from loss, grown through love, strengthened by purpose, Emma's voice broke the peaceful moment. We did good, didn't we? All of us together? Michael and Sterling exchanged glances over her head, seeing in each other. The journey shared, the trust built, the family forged from choice rather than chance. Yes, they answered together. We did good. As evening settled over the estate, 3 figures remained on the garden bench, their silhouettes merging with the gathering dusk. Behind them, the mansion's warm lights promised welcome. Before them, the garden bloomed with providence, and around them, the legacy of 2 remarkable women lived on in the family they had helped create. Not through their presence, but through the love they had left behind. Some might call it a fairy tale. This story of a struggling single father, a silent billionaire, and the little girl who helped them both find their voice. But those who knew them best understood it was something far more valuable. Proof that family, like flowers in an untended garden, can bloom in the most unexpected places. You just have to be willing to see with your heart.